Huh? What? Why? What was the point of Daleks' Genesis of Terror?
Money, 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 money.
That's the reason why you did it. You did an underwater menace. You did an underwater menace, Big Finish. I will always save a Big Finish 100% of the time. Focus on quality and passion. Now it's 99.9%. But yeah, let's just be blunt about it, because that's who I am. This is the most pointless release of all time. So the idea of Daleks' Genesis of Terror is that the original draft of Genesis of the Daleks Episode 1 was to be the main thing about the story, this Big Finish release. So it acts as 50% of the story. It's Episode 1, its draft, recreated. And the other 50% of it is the other episodes of Genesis of the Daleks, told in narration. And yeah, that might not make too much sense to you. What? The other 50% featuring 5 episodes and the previous 50% being 1? So how does that work? Well, I'll get to that later. Episode 1 is, they say, the reason of why this release is a thing. And it more takes the form of the early adventures formula, but less so putting acting, voice acting and impressions and an acting performance in the narration, but more read it like a script, that it sounds more authentic. But to be honest, I would rather just read the script itself. The episode 1, the draft, compared to what we got on screen with Genesis of the Daleks, it's more similar than it is different. There are differences within the story. This has made some people sigh, but it has referenced the Time War, yada yada, whatever. But one of the reasons why they justified it was the original Episode 1 was more darker. Well, Genesis of the Daleks has always been a dark and bleak story, really. Okay, the performances in Episode 1, especially the Khaleds. Now, I don't like to be like this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. It felt like, I know this happened during lockdown, 2021 is when it was originally recorded. But the Khaleds, the voice actors for them, like Raven, for example, it sounded like they recorded it in their own bathrooms. I mean, if you just look at like Raven and Nida compared to the original Genesis of the Daleks, it's night and day. And some of their lines are identical, and it's just it makes myself, I just don't think it was worth to be just a standalone release. What this needed was to be a bonus extra in the ARC release. Because I don't necessarily have an issue with adapting this original script of Genesis of the Daleks Episode 1. It's how it was shoehorned into a release. And it was, to anyone with one functioning brain cell, knows that money was the primary motivator. And yeah, of course, that's what companies do. They're supposed to make money. But if profit and money is over passion and quality, then I am going to have a talk about it. I don't think Episode 1's draft is different enough, even if you're a huge Genesis of the Daleks fan, to even warrant the price of it. I've heard some people who said they're happy. Most people aren't with buying this release. So again, I don't speak for everyone. I'm only speaking for myself. But I think the best thing they could have done with this story is just include it as an extra bonus in the ARC release, which is more of a full, because John Lucarotti's original ARC script was completely different from the ARC in space that we have on screen, while Genesis of the Daleks, very, very little. So I go, what's the point? But I do call this the Underwater Menace for Big Finish. Not because of episode 1. I think it's like, my opinion on episode 1's draft is okay, whatever. I'm indifferent to it. But my problem actually comes with episode 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. This is where I think they were kind of like taking the piss a little bit here. And it just doesn't feel warranted to be something of quality or passion. It feels that it completely lacks it, and money and profit was just the primary motivator of why this release even exists. And that's why a lot of people, I think, are right, definitely, by saying this release was 100% rushed. And very little passion and quality went into it. The reason why episode 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are shoehorned in the other 50% of the audio is because they're condensed into a few minutes in duration, and they're narrated by one person. And it sounds worse when you actually listen to it rather than me explaining it. I thought, my reaction to it is, I said, what on God's earth is this? To charge £10 for a download and $12.99 for the CD, it didn't feel worth it. And that's what annoys me the most, because this definitely shouldn't have been a release to begin with, because of how I'm sorry to say this, as much as I appreciate Big Finish, episode 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, they were probably the most laziest thing Big Finish have ever done I've ever witnessed. I'm sorry to say it, but it's true. And I have to be truthful. That's the whole point of being a reviewer. And I'm thinking it's just completely of an inconsequential release. So with episode 2 to 6 being narrated, there's so many other medias I can experience Genesis of the Daleks. I can do the original episode, I can read the target novelization or listen to the audio novelization to it, and there's even the CD radio version of it too, so why narrate it in the first place? So yeah, so Big Finish have lost their 100% with me. And mind you, it's only a one-off. It's only a one-off. They are now 99.9% when it comes to quality and passion now. Yeah, this is the most pointless release of all time. If you're a fan of Genesis of the Daleks, like I'm like a super fan, this release will probably honestly annoy you. And you think, why did I get it? That's probably why it might make you feel. But yeah, this isn't more like a review, it's more like a rant on this release. It's just the most pointless thing ever. I think what some people are doing with Daleks Genesis of Terror is a little bit... I don't really respect it, really, because some people are review bombing it, giving it like 1 star, 1 out of 10 and whatever, but they haven't even listened to the story. So, that's not a good thing to do. I mean, why? You have to listen to it to actually give your opinion of the story. And, I find this more funny, but people are saying it's even worse than Necromantia. Necromantia is an original story. It's, I consider complete trash, but it's still an original story. This is just the most pointless release of all time. It's not the worst release of all time, it's just the most pointless. It's pointless. So I think comparing Necromantia to this story is very hyperbolic of a statement. But boy, I'm not making friends with this video, am I? It's, well, that's just the integrity of a reviewer. You just have to be honest and say what you need to about these releases. It's not worth the money. It's a pointless cash grab, as I've explained multiple times. I would say if Big Finish repeat this format of just recreating a already known TV story, but they adapt one of the episodes, the original draft, and then the others are just narration, avoid it. Because it's a very lazy formula. But, of course, I always have a lot of appreciation for Big Finish. This is just the one-off. It's the only time I've actually seen it where Big Finish have done this, so I consider it a one-off. And I think The Lost Stories is kind of losing its what made it shine in the first place. Because I've even been looking back at The Lost Stories by creating a video, and I'm saying the unmade, not the Lost Stories, the unmade stories of Doctor Who through the 60s, 70s are so fascinating, and there's so much they can use to recreate stories. But then they go ahead and do this. I just find it bizarre. So I think they need to go back to the original formula. Completely avoid stories like this, or with this formula. They're not worth it, and they're not worth your hard-earned money. What do I rate it? I'm not going to rate it anything. It doesn't deserve a rating. It's pointless. But yeah, that's the topic. See ya.